Hello, my name is Adrian Travé, and this is the video presentation for the first semester essay of critical thought. The topic discussed in this case is whether the measures taken by governments against the spread of COVID-19 reduce our freedom or not. To discuss this, we will look at the work of authors Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. We will compare them and decide which stance they will take regards to this topic. This debate is very relevant today, almost 2 years since the pandemic itself began, since COVID caught most Western world countries by surprise. This led to them putting measures such as lockdown in motion, the likes of which, as born around the turn of the century, had never seen before in the democratic world. For many, these measures transgress their individual freedom. In any case, we look to the great authors of the past for comparison. It's fitting to begin with Hobbes, since not only does he precede the aforementioned thinkers, but their work, in many ways, is a response to his. Hobbes lived during times of political turmoil, and so, C.B. Macpherson says, he sought to establish the foundation for a self-perpetuating sovereign state. In other words, civil stability. Men would feel urged to leave the state of nature where they could fall prey to one another, and yield all their rights to an artificial governing body to rule over them, the Leviathan, forming a social pact. This raises two questions. Is there a limit to the sovereign's power? Essentially, no, for it signed no covenant with its subjects and cannot act unjustly. So, when does Hobbes say men are free? He provides the following definition in chapter 14. The absence of external impediments, which may often take away part of a man's power to do what he would. This would place him in the school of negative freedom theory, that is, the lack of external impediments limiting his movement. However, scholars like David Van Mil have pointed out he also contemplates internal impediment, such as fear or reason. In any case, seeing as they have subjected themselves freely under the rule of the sovereign, whom they have a moral obligation to obey, I would not say their freedom would be impeded any further in this case. Locke and Rousseau would hereafter have the challenge of taming the seemingly unchecked power of the Leviathan. The former, in the midst of the rise of market society, aimed to establish equal individual rights as the moral basis for a civil community. These individual rights were life, liberty, and state, also known as possessions, and men would take them with themselves in creating a social pact with a sovereign capable of enforcing law. Their major focus was the protection of property, which Hobbes said they could appropriate when mixing land with their own labor. Furthermore, he would go on to justify the exchange of surplus fruits for money, the unequal appropriation of land, and selling one's labor for wages in the name of reason and an emerging capitalist economic model. A structure of limited, consented government matched with this the most, and eventually led to the formation of a class state. To paraphrase Macpherson once again, the rule of the majority, those with considered with reason, affords protection for the propertied individual. The rational were free, but this freedom included scarcely half the population. As such, a transgression on their individual freedom would depend on the extent to which the government's action prevents them from exploiting their possessions and enjoying its fruits. It's difficult to say they could revolt against the government, for as long as it operates within the common standing rule, it may not be misusing its power. As for Rousseau, he was not in favor of the degeneracy of representative democracy into such class states. Instead, he proposed following the concept of the general will, generated by the social contract, as the source of political legitimacy. The general will is, in abstraction, an indivisible and inalienable incarnation of the citizens' common interests, which, coupled with the education of individuals in classical republican values, sought to make a fairer form of association preoccupied with its own general well-being. Although citizens yield their natural freedom, they gain civil and moral liberty, The problem is that once they delegate the sovereignty of the general will, such is the case with representative democracies today, any act by the government, such as the example, is unjust and a negative to our freedom. In the case, however, of a small-scale civil community, it's feasible to say they would be acting in compliance with the common interest. And so, it would seem that although the debate is full of shades of grey, the key point of difference is the preference of individual freedom or common well-being slash civil liberty. The issue becomes more complicated still, because the exercise of the former may harm the latter. In any case, it's clear to see the great thinkers of the past still influence today's discourses.